Welcome to Parenting Adventures. We help parents empower their kids to build a growth mindset so they can tackle any size challenge that school and life can throw at them. From grades to bullying and struggles at home and school, and everything in between. Whether you're in the elementary alphabet stage or navigating high school credits, we're diving into how you can relate and influence positive action. Stick around for real solutions, expert tips, and stories that resonate and inspire. Ready for personalized mindful tutoring? Head to tutorteach.ca/tutoring to see how our 9 cornerstones to success have helped over 3,000 students achieve their goals. Now, let's dig into the episode.
Do you struggle to let your child take risks when playing? I'm your host, Lara, and today we're excited to have Dr. Mariana Brussoni with us to talk about just that. Dr. Brussoni is the director of the Human Early Learning Partnership, a professor in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of British Columbia, and an investigator at the British Columbia Children's Hospital Research Institute. Her groundbreaking research explores the importance of outdoor, risky play on children's development, as well as how parents, educators, and communities can overcome the barriers that keep kids from playing freely outside. From risk assessment to strengthening resilience, Dr. Brussoni breaks down exactly why parents should consider letting their children play with a little more risk. In this episode, we dive into what exactly counts as risky play, why it's crucial for a child's physical, emotional, and cognitive development, and how parents can strike a balance between safety and risk. Stay tuned for an insightful conversation that may just shift how you think about risk and play in childhood. You won't want to miss it. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so thrilled to have you on the podcast to talk about your research surrounding risky play. To start, can you help our listeners understand what risky play really is? How do you define it, and what kinds of activities would you say qualify as risky play?
Yeah, I think most people would recognize risky play as something that they love to do, or, if they have kids, that they would have seen it in their kids. So the way we define it in kind of the academic literature is thrilling and exciting forms of play where kids are engaged with uncertainty and there's a chance of physical injury. And so I want to break each of those elements down for you because it's important, but just to kind of give people an idea of what this looks like, it could be playing at heights like climbing trees. It could be rough and tumble play. It could be kind of wandering the neighborhood without adult supervision, or feeling like they're somewhere in a hidey hole alone. Those kinds of things when kids are pushing themselves past where they usually have. So if we return to the definition, the thrilling and exciting is really kids trying things that they haven't tried before, pushing themselves that much farther. And this is a feeling that kind of borders on fear, right? So it's kind of that line between this is too scary or this is boring. It's that kind of fine line in between. They're engaged with uncertainty, so they're like, they don't know what's going to happen. Could be good, could be bad, and that's part of the thrill. And then the chance of physical injury is like when you're moving your body, particularly when you're taking risks, there is a chance of physical injury. And part of my research has been actually looking at how big a chance that is. And the punchline is that it's not something that we really need to worry about very deeply.
Interesting. So is adrenaline a part of all of this? Is that kind of a factor that plays into risky play?
In terms of, the reaction of the body, this is a really important point in that what it looks like is the fight or flight response. So certainly adrenaline, it's the body kind of activating for action. But one of the reasons why this kind of play is so important is because when you have those strong feelings, because they really are strong feelings, not only in the body, but in the mind, the difference between seeing them as something kind of too scary, dangerous, negative to be avoided versus seeing them as something to kind of lean into or thrill, that's not the body, because the reaction is the same. It's the mind that's deciding that, right? And so one of the reasons that risky play is so important is because it trains kids to get used to those really strong feelings and to not just default to this is too scary and I'm going to withdraw, but actually think about, this is a new opportunity and I can lean in. And that is actually related to kind of a reduction in levels of anxiety and those kinds of things that that can keep kids from meeting their full potential.
Interesting. So parents often worry when they hear the word risk. What are some of the biggest misconceptions or fears you've encountered from parents and caregivers about risky play?
So what we talk about when we talk about risk, and one of the things that we've done intentionally is to use the word risk in risky play. And the reason that we've done that is because risk is actually a neutral word. It denotes a likelihood of something happening, but it could be positive or it could be negative. And so we wanted to uncouple that from the more traditional use being danger or hazard, something that should be controlled or stopped. And so we really want people to think of those as different things. And so if you think about, kind of say play spaces or what you allow your child to do, you want to keep the risk, the opportunity for them to make a decision for themselves around, how far they want to push themselves or what they want to try out, and manage the hazard. So are there things in that play space that could be really dangerous to cause serious injury, right? And so you want to manage those so that the kids can really have the freedom to explore.
Do you think that the approach to risky play has changed over the years, because the term dubbed helicopter parents comes up a lot more frequently now? So how do you think that plays into risky play? Are parents, we talked to say my parents and they'll say, we would just send you out to play for 8 hours and we'll see you later. But parents now are a lot more reserved doing that, more cautious. So how does risky play, has it adapted, evolved, changed?
Yeah, there's been big changes. Well, first of all, we didn't need the term risky play until about a decade ago, right? So it used to just be play. And we could expect, and we do expect that when kids start to play, they will take risks. And in the past, this was kind of normal. As you say, it was quite typical to tell your kids, go out and don't come home till the streetlights come on. We saw a big change in the late 80s with a shift in parenting to more of an intensive parenting approach. What some people call, or have referred to as helicopter parenting. There's different models, the tiger parenting or whatever. The essential kind of characteristic is that parents are paying more attention to their kids. Parent is turned into a verb from a noun, and something that you do versus something that you just are in relation to your child. And the expectation of what it means to be a good parent is a parent who kind of curates their child's childhood to make sure that they have as many kind of enriching experiences as possible to develop their brains and make sure that they succeed in life. The other aspect of good parenting is that you keep your child safe. And so there's a few things that are challenging here because, first of all, parents feel that they're judged by their children's accomplishments, activities, or even their injuries. And so, they're taking it very personally. There's a very strong norm in society and a pressure to be this kind of good parent. And certainly that's been proliferated by social media. And over time, we've kind of lost the sense of kids as capable and competent, and play as something that's a really core aspect of life to really just seeing as a waste of time and time that's taken away, say, from academic pursuits or other pursuits that are more important. And so we've really, in this sense, we've kind of lost the plot, and we've lost a lot. And we're, in academia, giving the term risky play, starting to study it, is our attempt to figure out what have we lost and how do we get it back.
That I really feel what you're saying. I was speaking to another mom a while ago, and she said, where I live, everyone has their kid in at least 3 activities, extracurricular activities. And my kids were still were still pretty young when she said this, and I thought, is there a quota for that? Is there really a threshold? But it's true. We're all comparing ourselves on social media and keeping up with the Joneses, and that so many kids are, the boys are in hockey and the girls are like, everyone's doing something, and so you're looking inside yourself going, am I doing enough for my child? And there's that whole theory that if you keep your children in extracurricular, they'll stay out of trouble. And so there's a lot of psychology, I think, behind why a parent is putting their kids in these activities, which activities they're putting them in, how frequently, what the impacts on their educations are, and so forth. So interesting that you say that, because it's true. I never thought when I became a mom that I was going to be faced with that.
Yeah, and it's really challenging. I'm a parent too, so I hear it too. And there's all sorts of kind of opinions that people don't hesitate to give around how you're doing as a parent and what you shouldn't or should be doing, right? And so some of the supports that we provide parents, and we have a tool for parents on our website on outsideplay.org that parents can go and use and kind of dig into this topic and what does it look like for them and their family. But one of the core things that we really have them do right off the top is think about what's really important to you. What are your core values? And so then how do you enact those core values around what you want for your child? And that can help you shut out the noise of other people telling you how you should parent.
I love that. Looking at within yourself to really figure out your own values. So, so smart. So you've studied how risky play impacts children and you touched on this a bit, but can you walk us through the specific development or emotional benefits of risky play that you found in your research?
Yeah, so I already mentioned the idea around the being able to kind of manage the strong emotions of thrill and excitement, and so more and more research is linking risky play to mental health, and in that case, for example, it's really clear in terms of um, when kids have a tendency to anxiety or even anxiety disorders, one of the characteristics is to avoid, and to be more likely to interpret things as dangerous or to be avoided. And so through a kind of common experiences, building experience with risk and risky play, they get more comfortable with understanding those feelings, understanding themselves, understanding how far they can push themselves, and to get to that point where it's thrilling and exciting and doesn't venture into this is just too scary. They just kind of build the resistance to that, and that really helps manage anxiety. I mean, I can go on and on in terms of the benefits. Some of the more basic research is like kids are just more physically active when they're engaged in this than not. They're less sedentary. They're spending less time on screens. They're outdoors. They're hanging out with their friends. And so you have a massive amount of social emotional learning that comes with, navigating friendships and figuring out what they want to do and how they want to do it together. It builds executive functioning skills because they make plans and they have to carry out those plans and they have to keep their attention on that task and so on. The physical movements that they can engage in, you think about kids playing indoors versus kids even playing outdoors, and how, nobody's telling them slow down, inside voices, like controlling their behavior as much. So they're able to move in ways that they're not able to move indoors. They're able to kind of understand themselves better, figure out what they're comfortable with, how far they can push themselves, how the world reacts to them, develop risk management skills, build their self-confidence because they're trying things out and their things are going well and they feel like I did it, I was able to do it. Or things go wrong and they realize, actually, it wasn't the end of the world and I can handle failure. And failure is just as important as success in terms of learning. And so, it kind of goes on and on. And I think for many people, if they think back to their favorite childhood play memory, they can probably really tap into those feelings and remember what it was like for them and just intuitively understand why it's so important.
That's so true. And it builds tenacity and resilience and, like you said, self-confidence for sure. And the ability, you have to learn to fail to succeed sometimes, and how to push their boundaries, what's too far, what's not far enough. I really see that. So it's tough for parents and educators to strike that balance between keeping kids safe and letting them take risks. Where do you think the line is, and what's your advice for navigating that?
Well, we started out with the definition of risky play, but it's not up to me or you or any adult to look at a kid playing and saying that's risky play and that's not risky play. Because it looks very different for different kids. So you can have kids of the same age, developmental stage, and one's got a lot of experience with climbing. And so like they're going to want to head to the top of the tree. Another one has less experience and they're lower down, and that's okay. Right. And so it's our role to prepare an environment a play environment that's enriching, interesting, lots of possibilities. We talk about 3 key ingredients for this: time, space, and freedom. So the space has to be interesting, enriching, that has these opportunities for risk, and has opportunities for risk for kids at many different levels. That we provide the time for it, that we prioritize it, and that we give them the freedom to play in those kinds of circumstances so that they can figure it out for themselves. So it's not up to us to put limits on it. It's up to us to really, as I said, are there serious hazards in this situation? From what I know about my child and the other children playing here, are there things that we need to manage? Perhaps we could even do it together and they can build their risk management skills. But then after that, it's like, go have fun.
I like that you're identifying that there's different levels of risk. For one child, getting up to the second branch might be their level of risk, and maybe the next level of risk will be the third branch. Whereas another kiddo can climb all the way to the top, swing with from their legs, and call it a day. So I think that's really interesting, and I like that perspective that it's really child dependent, and we should all just make sure that we're not judging each other on the freedoms we give our children.
Exactly. And one of the things that we really work on with parents is fear. We've identified that we have this kind of endemic anxiety-based caregiving, which is our approach right now. And so the way that we approach children and what they're allowed to do is actually about managing our own anxieties and fears, rather than what does this child in front of me most need to thrive in this situation. And that's very common in terms of, evolutionarily speaking, when we are afraid, then we become very focused on trying to reduce that fear and thinking about that, rather than kind of an expansive, broad thinking. And so we work with parents around, first of all, naming that fear, realizing that it's the fear that is driving our "don't do that, stop, be careful, watch out." It's our fear. If we can kind of count to 17 seconds, say, when we have that inclination to be like, watch out, be careful, and take the time to be like, deep breath, is my fear warranted? And what's the effect of my interfering with what's going on right now, and the effect it'll have on my child who's hearing, say, be careful, but what they're taking in is, you don't trust me, I've done something wrong, I'm not good at it, I need an adult to tell me what to do, and how, self-confidence destroying that kind of thing is. If we can kind of give parents the space to kind of recognize the fear and pause before they act on it so that they can, think more broadly, then it really can help stop some of these big challenges that we see around this kind of play.
So do you think that parents are projecting
Their fears?
Yeah, their fears, they're kind of projecting it onto their children?
So, the things that parents fear that we've heard about are things like kidnapping, say if their kid is able to wander the neighborhood. And I can tell you all the statistics around that. They fear their child, say, getting seriously injured, hit by a car, et cetera, concussion. And they fear what other parents will think of them, much like you talked about, right? Like, am I doing something wrong? And so it's like recognizing that, well, first of all, like, okay, so how likely is it that these horrible things will happen in this situation? And I can tell you, statistically speaking, minimally tiny, particularly in play spaces, which are within certain boundaries. And so it's like, one of the things with human beings is that we're really bad at accurate risk perception. We're really bad at it. And this is another example of it. So we have this kind of heightened risk, especially because they're our kids. They're the most important thing in our life, and so we feel this strong sense of protectiveness, but it overwhelms us from actually making kind of decisions that are more child-centered, that are more around the needs of the child versus our own needs.
It kind of blurs your judgment. It fogs it a little. Yeah. I could see that for sure, especially with social media showing, it's like the news. Every time you turn it on, you just see everything that's going wrong in the world versus all the good that comes from it. So it plagues your decision making.
Absolutely. Understandably so, right? I get it.
So I'm curious, what do you think the role is of urban design and public spaces in facilitating risky play? How do these elements impact children's access to risky play? And are there ways we can design better spaces to encourage it?
Mm. Well, we talked about how risky play has gone down over time, and I spoke about intensive parenting. But of course, there's other things that have come into the way, and part of that is urban design. So over time, we've seen in prioritizing the movement of cars over people, densification, urbanization, and so it means that we have more people living in smaller spaces. When you have high-rise apartments, it's hard to get to know your neighbors. It's hard to have that feeling of kind of community and social connectedness, right? As well as, is there actually access to, nice places for kids to play close by? And there, you can imagine there can be a real inequity in terms of, higher income neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods, and that sort of stuff. So urban design has a massive amount to play with this, and we've seen some exciting changes and approaches in terms of, a recognition that the movement of cars should not be the priority of cities and city planning. And so how do we think about people and making livable cities, particularly for our most vulnerable citizens, our youngest and our oldest? And when we do that, we actually make cities that are better for everyone, right? But there's, very simple things that can be done to make sure that there are places to play that are accessible to all children, right? You've seen pocket parks or things like that spring up. And so, it's all of society approach that has to be taken to putting children at the center of how we do things and how we plan things to make sure that the children have access to these kinds of opportunities.
So, what has been the general response to your research from parents, educators, and policymakers? Have you noticed any change in attitudes toward risky play as your findings have gained more attention?
Yeah, it's a bit of a kind of a two steps forward, one step back kind of thing. We've had some big wins, like in January, the Canadian Pediatric Society released a position statement on risky play, where they basically told their pediatricians, this is an important tool for your clinical toolbox for some of the things that you're seeing the most often in your office: obesity, behavioral issues, and anxiety. And as part of that position statement, they also urged a whole of society approach, like we talked about, within schools, childcare, city planning, et cetera, to really make sure that kids have access to this kind of play. So that's, a really big endorsement. We've had big endorsements also from the Council of Chief Medical Officers of Health, which are, the people who were in charge of how we dealt with COVID. Those groups felt that this was really important, and many other kind of important groups. And then you read about stuff that happens, say schools which have really restrictive rules, or people who have social services called on them because their kids are taking the bus or things like that. And it feels like we're taking, a step back. But all in all, I'm really optimistic because I'm getting more invitations like this. It's entering, it seems to be entering the more public consciousness and lexicon, and people thinking about it more. And so we are not done, but I'm optimistic in terms of where we're heading.
That's great. And it's an interesting topic because, like you said, it's kind of just emerging almost. And I do think it warrants more conversation for sure.
Well, and we've been working with our National Injury Prevention Organization, Parachute, and with the Canadian Pediatric Society and others. And the approach that we've settled on is to keep kids as safe as necessary, not as safe as possible. We're not trying to prevent every injury. We know that there will be sprains, strains, broken arms, et cetera, but we're trying to prevent the most serious injuries or deaths, right?
So for those listening who want to dig more into your research and learn more about what you do, where can they find that and where can they follow you?
Yeah, they can go to outsideplay.org. That's our website. It has the parent tool. There's also a tool for childcare workers and for for teachers, and updates on our research. And then, of course, we're on Instagram and X and LinkedIn and Facebook, and they can find us on most of those platforms through @Outside Play UBC.
And is that a Canadian organization, or is it more centric to BC?
Our research is across Canada, and the tools are free, and everything's free. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing about your research and your findings. I think that parents are going to maybe take a little bit of a deep breath after listening to this one and thinking that maybe they're not doing something so wrong with letting their kids have a bit of freedom.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks so much for joining us on Parenting Adventures. Remember, you're not alone in this journey, and we're always here to help. Parenting is like trying to fold a fitted sheet. It seems impossible at first, but with enough determination, you can make it work. Kind of. If you're ready for the next step, visit tutorteach.ca/tutoring for personalized mindful tutoring and discover how we've helped over 3,000 students reach their goals. Until next time, keep calm and fold on.